Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, the deep state is on the run as Kash Patel fires at least 10 individuals at the FBI. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show on demand on your own time in your favorite podcast app by simply searching for the Nick Craig Show. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning is brought to you by Melissa Gott and the Law Group and her team over at the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call 910-251-6088. The term deep state is one that is not new. For those that have followed the rise of President Donald Trump over the last, and it's crazy that this is even about to come out of my mouth, but over the last decade, that is how long that Donald Trump has been in the public political sphere. You have heard him talk about this entity, this organization, this group of individuals known as the deep state for quite some time. It was a major topic of discussion in the first Trump administration. I will admit, has not come up as much in this second go around in a little over a year now that President Donald Trump has been back in the Oval Office as the duly sworn president of the United States. But what he highlighted, and let me make sure I get this out of the way, there's a lot of discussion on those on the political left that, of course, love to make fun of everything that President Donald Trump says, which is fine. You know, it's their right to do so. I'm not offended. I'm not crumbling into a million pieces because of it. But these individuals on the left kind of mock this idea of the deep state. And from my vantage point, and I know everybody has a little bit of a different definition as to what exactly that means and what exactly encompasses the term deep state. But from my vantage point, these are individuals, bureaucrats within high levels of our government, most predominantly in the three-letter agencies. We're talking the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, these agencies and these entities that are flying under the radar and are attempting to do significant damage, most prominently recently to Donald Trump. They have continued to use their very influential, very high positions of power, and in some cases, very high level of access. The information that these individuals have access to is as high as it goes. I mean, you're talking about like people that have the master key, for lack of a better term. They can unlock any door, get into any database, any system within the highest levels of these three-letter agencies. They want to see the President of the United States fail. Now, this also coincides with another interesting kind of discussion or talking point, which is the weaponization of the federal government. Now, that is one that is a little bit more broad and a little bit more mainstream. And I think, and I feel confident saying this to you here on a Thursday, is a very real thing. We have continued to see, whether it's deep state actors or not, the continued weaponization of federal government resources, which, as you are well aware, is things that you and I are paying for. We are paying these six-figure salaries to these high-up individuals in these in the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, wherever, for them to actively try and destroy President Donald Trump, for them to try and dig up as much controversy, as much dirt, whatever it might be, on the now sitting president of the United States. I, as many of you, have a major problem with that. These individuals understand, and rightfully so, that Donald Trump is a threat to the system. Yes, even though he has been involved in the public lexicon as it relates to politics now for a decade, when he first shot onto the scene in late 2015, early 2016, he was the quintessential definition of an outsider. This was a guy that had no allegiances to anybody. This was a guy who was not actively involved in the political process. His I guess you'd say his most active political stuff was donating money to political campaigns and candidates, most predominantly in New York City, where he was conducting the vast majority of his business. But outside of that, which I would not consider a large level of political involvement, outside of that, you are talking about a guy that was completely outside the system. And he started talking about these entities, these actors, very early on, and they got spooked. And I guess it makes sense. These cast of characters had been for years and for decades, this larger group flying under the radar, doing, in some cases, what I would argue, very illegal things behind the scenes. And now there was a guy back in 2016 who was running to be the commander-in-chief, running to be the 45th president of the United States, that was calling some of them out, that was highlighting some of the issues that were taking place at the hands of these individuals. And you saw, whether it was Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and, Operation, I don't remember exactly what it was called, Operation Spitfire Hurricane or something like that. I mean, they had these things that were going on to try and make sure that Donald Trump was not successful. Tried to set up a situation where even maybe they could sway the presidential election using the incredible amount of data and information that they had access to, the master key into all of these different data systems and backdoor systems to try and influence and affect a major presidential election. Then, of course, you know how the conversation unfolded from there. Right? It was actually Donald Trump himself that was working with the Russian government to get elected. Remember Russiagate? I know it was a long time ago. I know it was many, many years ago. But that was the discussion and the conversation, folks. That Donald Trump, who had a major election victory in November of 2016 over the failed Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, he didn't win it himself. He didn't convince the American people that he was the best choice possible on the ballot. He didn't do any of that. He was put into that position, propped into that position by the works of Vladimir Putin and Russia. Because, that's typically how the Democrats operate. This is a long recurring theme. You've heard me talk about it many a times. Democrats can't accept responsibility for anything that they do. They believe that they are flawless in everything that they execute. They believe that every plan that they've ever had is absolutely the best thing, the most important invention since sliced bread. Meanwhile, when it blows up in their face, which it's happened with Hillary Clinton in 2016, instead of looking back and saying, well, yeah, we ran a very unpopular individual, somebody that nobody likes. I mean, Hillary Clinton is one of the most unlikable political characters. By the way, across party lines, she's not a well-liked individual in general. They ran her. Trump killed her in the election in 2016, an absolute electoral bloodbath for the Democrats. And their solution is not to look in the mirror, very similar to what we would then go on to see 8 years later in 2024. Instead of looking in the mirror, recapping, kind of stepping back a little bit and reflecting on what we did right, what we didn't do right, they look to point the finger at somebody else. So they ginned up this entire fake, now completely debunked controversy that the president, the sitting duly elected president of the United States, was illegitimate because he was propped up by a foreign entity, one who would argue an adversarial nation to the United States in Russia. And that was the meme. That was the narrative. That's what was being pushed by many of these deep state actors that, to the chagrin of President Donald Trump, stayed around pretty long into his first administration. There's no question about this, and I'm not saying this to be critical. It's an absolute fact. When Trump first won, and he's talked about this since. I saw an interview he did last week about this. When he first won in 2016, he did not have the best people around him. He didn't. I mean, we can talk about Jeff Sessions. We can go through the laundry list of all of the bad picks by Trump. He wasn't involved in the system. He didn't have all of these contacts and these connections. It was very much a trial by fire situation ongoing, and it's why it took the first Trump administration, I would argue, almost 2 years to get off the ground. And so many of those characters stood around for quite some time until Trump was actually able to get to them. We turn our attention today to a new story. This started running late yesterday, coming out from a couple of different entities. I've got an article from CBS News and also another article from the Washington Times discussing this. I'll start with the CBS News article, which reads like this. At least 10 FBI staffers who worked on the Mar-a-Lago documents case are fired, according to sources. And the article goes on to say, at least 10 FBI employees who worked on former special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into President Trump's retention of classified records after he left the White House in 2021 were fired on Wednesday, multiple sources told CBS News. The firings came after Reuters reported that the FBI had subpoenaed records of phone calls made by FBI Director Kash Patel and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles while they were both private citizens as part of the Jack Smith probe into Trump. Now, I'm not going to we need to dive into this. Let me make sure that you're fully understanding what this second paragraph is reading over at this CBS News article. Kash Patel, who is a private citizen at the time. Susie Wiles, who, by the way, is still a private citizen. She's not appointed. She is a picked person by the president to be the chief of staff. Patel had to, of course, be approved, and there was a congressional process for that. But two private individuals at the time, throughout 21, 22, 23, those years, had the FBI essentially tapping their phones. Now, for those that are not familiar, phone tapping, the way in which it used to work, does not exist anymore, with practically all communication happening via cell phones now. Nobody is talking on landlines, where in the olden days you would have the FBI or other agencies physically tap the line, meaning break into the connection so they could listen to a back and forth phone call. That does not exist anymore as it used to. So the wiretapping, or the records of phone calls, is a little bit different than it used to be. But you've got two private individuals. Yes, closely aligned with Trump. Susie Wiles was with Trump throughout the entirety of the 2021, 2, 3, and 4 campaign. The FBI was surveilling private individuals. Now, unless the argument is that Kash Patel and Susie Wiles were running some sort of, drug running operation, and were committing some major amounts of crimes, well, then this would, to me, be a not only completely unconstitutional, but a complete and total invasion of privacy. These are not elected individuals. These are private citizens. They are, for all intents and purposes, you and I. Yes, they are higher profile, sure, but they're just regular American citizens. The Trump administration was not in there in 2021. Joe Biden and his cohort of idiots were in power in 2021. These individuals were, for all intents and purposes, private U.S. citizens. The article goes on. The Reuters article quoted Patel, who alleged that the FBI had secretly subpoenaed his phone records using, quote, flimsy pretexts and burying the entire process in prohibited case files designed to evade all oversight. There's the deep state. That's it, really well described in one sentence from the current FBI director, Kash Patel. These flimsy documents that are used to obtain these phone records, then they're buried in case files that nobody knows and nobody would ever bother looking at, and all of it, as Patel notes, to evade all oversight, to just evade it. That's how the deep state operates. That is what they do, because they know that in many cases what they're doing is illegal. They don't even have the ability to do it. So they go around everybody. They try and skirt as many of the normal processes, which I would imagine within the FBI, there's plenty of processes laid out that is very clear, and there's very clear guides on how to go through certain things like subpoenaing phone records and things of that nature. And these individuals decided that they are not and were not going to follow that process, leading us to where we are right now. Here is one of the breaking stories on this. This was on Bret Baier's show last night on the Fox News channel, who was one of the first to bring this to light. Listen to this.
David, another topic. The FBI Director Kash Patel out with an allegation that the prior FBI obtained his phone records, and not only his. What can you tell us about that?
Right, this has been breaking in the last hour or so. We are told that, according to Kash Patel, the FBI director, the prior bureau leadership obtained his phone records and phone records to current White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles back in 2022 and 2023. This eventually led into the Jack Smith special counsel investigation into then former President Donald Trump. We're told that some of these records are just toll records, which don't have specific information other than times and dates. They don't have the actual content of calls, but two sources in the FBI say that Susie Wiles' attorney agreed to be recorded by FBI agents in 2023. She did not agree. We've reached out to her for comment. FBI Director Patel, in a statement to Fox News, calls this outrageous and deeply disturbing. And I will add, Brett, that we are told at least 10 Bureau employees have been fired just today over this incident, with more potentially to come.
Okay, we'll continue to dig into it. David Spun on Capitol Hill. Thanks.
So that was David Spun and Bret Baier on the Fox News channel last night. I think that show's on the 6 o'clock hour as this information was first coming out. And as Patel noted, deeply disturbing. Oh, yeah, you don't say. Oh, you don't say. Deeply disturbing that you had the Biden FBI, no surprise there, actively surveilling private individuals who at the time were very close to Donald Trump. Susie Wiles, probably the closest. I don't know exactly what Patel and Trump's relationship was and how close they really were throughout the years of 2022, 2023, and 2024. I do know for an absolute fact that Susie Wiles was right there. I mean, the architect of Donald Trump's insane election victory that he had in November of 2024. It's the reason why now she's the White House Chief of Staff, because of the success that she had, the incredible campaign and analysis and all of the things that she put together, delivering a massive victory for President Donald Trump just back a couple of years ago. And so you've got the Democrat Party, which you are also not surprised to hear, continuing what they were doing in the final days of the Obama administration when Donald Trump had won in November. There obviously is a gap there. Election day is in early November. The president is not typically sworn in until later in the month in January. So you've got about a 6 or 8 week window there where the previous outgoing administration is still in charge and the new guy who had already won the election is yet to be sworn in. And you saw what was going on there. And again, it was a long time ago, but these conversations were taking place. You had the Obama FBI trying to piece together these arguments and these discussions over how Donald Trump didn't legitimately win and it was Russia that put him in office. And now we're finding out that a similar thing was going on during the Biden administration, except it was going on through the entirety of the administration. This wasn't just in a specific period of time right after the November election. This was going on through the entirety of Joe Biden's 4 years in the Oval Office. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a major problem with this, and I will say that you should also have a major problem with this. Continuing the conversation on this, back to the CBS News article. They write, and this is the infamous CBS News, Kash Patel did not provide any evidence of wrongdoing by the staff who were terminated. Didn't provide any evidence? You mean going to a court, in all likelihood a FISA court, using flimsy pretext to subpoena these phone records and then hiding the entire process in prohibited case files so that nobody knew what was going on isn't enough evidence? Okay, we'll take CBS's commentary there as gospel. It goes on to say, Special Counsel Jack Smith oversaw 2 federal probes into now President Trump. One case alleged he unlawfully tried to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election, while the other focused on his retention of classified documents and efforts to obstruct the Justice Department when asked him to return the files. All of the FBI agents and analysts who were fired on Wednesday were involved in the classified documents case. And let me remind you what was going on there. Now, whether this is right or wrong is irrelevant. There has been, for quite a significant amount of time now, an issue with presidents leaving the Oval Office. By the nature of the work that they do, there is a lot of classified information. As you are aware, the president is in fact the commander-in-chief and has access to the highest levels of information anywhere in our government. And so presidents, whether we're talking about George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, there's always been, at least it would appear to me, this lack of accurate transition between them as it relates to some of these documents. When a president is going out, they shove everything in bankers' boxes, they put it in a storage unit, or in the case of Barack Obama, a mattress store in Chicago, and the documents just sit there. There's just, you're moving out of your house kind of frantically. So everything just kind of gets shoved into boxes and shipped to wherever the now former president wants those things stored. We saw Joe Biden, of course, had all his documents sitting next to his Corvette in the garage. I don't really have an issue with that, to be perfectly honest with you. I can't imagine that the classified documents that these presidents are walking away with are truly the most important things in the world. I mean, I'm sure maybe some of it is, but I think, in general, there's a lot of stuff that's classified. Some of it is more important than others. This classification is a pretty broad term. But this is something that is now well understood is a problem when presidents are transitioning out of the Oval Office. But what you didn't see with previous presidents like Barack Obama and his classified documents being stored in a mattress store, or Joe Biden when he was the vice president of the United States storing his documents in his garage next to his Corvette, what you didn't see was a midnight raid of the FBI. But that's what you did see for Donald Trump. And this lands more heavily into the discussion on the political persecution of your opposition. Donald Trump, who was at the time the previous sitting president of the United States, back being just a private citizen, yes, a former president, he had his property at Mar-a-Lago raided by the FBI so that they could collect all of these classified documents. What documents were collected? We still have no idea. All we saw were these ridiculously stupid PR photos from the FBI with a bunch of cover sheets that said classified documents. A bunch of manila folders opened up with a cover page that said classified. That's all we saw. They scoured them out all over the floor, indicating that Trump had just essentially dumped these boxes upside down and allowed them to just fly, all these papers and documents to just fly all over the place. No, it was a PR stunt. It was a PR move by the FBI to make it seem like, oh, this guy, look at it, ladies and gentlemen, classified documents are just hanging out all over the floor at Mar-a-Lago, which I'll note, by the way, is behind a fence and has private security 24/7, a whole hell of a lot more secure than Barack Obama's mattress store where he was storing his documents, or Joe Biden's garage next to his Corvette. Nevertheless, that's what was going on. So you had the FBI literally raid the home of a former president to get these classified documents back. Over to back to the CBS News article. CBS News confirmed with a source familiar with the matter that Susie Wiles' records were reviewed as part of the documents case, but was unable to verify whether Patel's were. In the case involving the 2020 election known as Arctic Frost, Patel's records were not subpoenaed according to the sources. So Patel was potentially subpoenaed under the documents case. CBS News reached out to the FBI for comment, and the FBI Agents Association, which represents current and former agents, condemned the firings in a statement, saying that they violated FBI employees' due process rights, which I found to be the funniest thing in all of this. So just to make sure you understand this, the guys and gals within the FBI who are conducting what I think we can accurately describe as these illegal operations, using very flimsy precedent to actively surveil U.S. citizens, private U.S. citizens, are now ticked off and dismayed by the fact that their, quote, due process rights were not dealt with. Don't you love the irony in that? Isn't that the most hypocritical thing that you've ever heard? With the FBI Agents Association telling CBS News, these actions weaken the Bureau by stripping away critical expertise and destabilizing the workforce, undermining trust in leadership, and jeopardizing the Bureau's ability to meet its recruitment goals, ultimately putting the nation at a great risk. Interesting that the FBI Agents Association has nothing to say about what Patel has alleged here. Notice how the FBI Agents Association isn't worried about destabilizing the workforce or stripping away critical expertise or undermining trust in leadership when agents at the very highest levels of that entity are actively weaponizing the position that they have against either a current or former sitting president of the United States. The amount of damage that has been done to entities like the FBI, like the CIA, like the NSA over the last 10 or 15 years, all of the general distrust that the American people have, there is nobody else to blame but the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and all of these other three-letter agencies. They have decided that it is more important for them to continue to grip power, for them to continue to be in these very high-level positions with no oversight and no scrutiny. That is more important to them than doing their job. That is the path that they've decided. Ladies and gentlemen, we did not force them, as conservatives, as Republicans, we didn't force them to go in front of FISA courts and get unconstitutional wiretaps against individuals. We did not force them to bury the work that they were doing in prohibited case files that nobody would have access to. We did not force that to happen. They chose to do that. They are the ones that decided that was the best course of action for them moving forward. And so why is the credibility and the trust of these institutions continuing to plummet in terms of general favorability and trust? Because of their own actions. But as I just mentioned with the Democrat Party, which many of these, if not most of these individuals are card-carrying Democrats, it's never their fault. It's never once been their fault for anything. And so once again, due to their own actions, their own what I would describe as short-sighted decisions to try and grip onto any sort of power whatsoever before evil, awful, terrible Donald Trump gets back in office, they have ruined the credibility of the FBI. They have ruined the credibility of an agency that we, as American people, should trust. That we should have a great deal of confidence when we see something coming out from the FBI, an official statement from the FBI. We should not question what is going on behind the scenes. I don't want to do that. I have no interest in criticizing or wanting to make sure that what we're hearing from these entities is accurate. But now I have no choice to. You have no choice but to question what you're seeing, what you're reading, and what you're hearing. And there is nobody else to blame but these individuals. No one else to blame at all. But somehow, you find this shocking and surprising. It's my fault. It's your fault. It's Kash Patel's fault. It's Susie Wiles' fault. It's Donald Trump's fault. Isn't it amazing how that always happens? Isn't that interesting? It's always everybody else's fault but theirs. It's not the agents that decided to do this. It wasn't Lisa Strzok or Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. It wasn't their fault. Donald Trump's fault. It wasn't Jack Smith's fault. It wasn't John Ratcliffe's fault. No. It was all our fault. Once again. Amazing how that works. I'll have more on this coming up here in just a couple of minutes, plus some of your great comments coming in as well. Before that, I want to thank the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show and remind you that if you have any legal challenges that might arise, there's nobody better to call in Eastern North Carolina than the Law Group here in Wilmington. Going all the way back to 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across our state. I, for example, used the law group back a couple of years ago when I went through the process of purchasing my house. They helped me navigate through the real estate transaction as a first-time home buyer. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing and what I was dealing with. Melissa got her team walked me through every step of that process. They made sure that any questions I had were answered immediately, and any issues that did come up were resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, they're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088. You can also visit their website, lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call, 910-251-6088, or online at lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break. We'll get into more of this. 10 FBI agents fired by Kash Patel because they were surveilling his and Susie Wiles' phone when they were private individuals. We'll have more on that coming up as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Thursday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Thursday to you, and welcome back to the Nick Craig Show as we continue the conversation today on 10 FBI agents being fired by FBI Director Kash Patel on Wednesday as they were alleged to have had parts in illegal wiretappings or illegal subpoenas on both now current FBI Director Kash Patel and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles when they were private citizens. This happened during the years of 2021, 2022, 23, and into portions of 2024 as this has become a common thread for the Democrats. When they are in these positions of power, when Democrats are in the Oval Office and making these appointees to the FBI and to the DOJ and these other entities, they are using their power corruptly. They are using their high-level positions of power not to keep bad guys off the streets, not to stop terrorist attacks here in the United States, but using it to go after their political opposition, using those positions of power. As I noted earlier in the show, we're talking about the highest level of individuals, access to literally everything, more than you and I even know exists, using that to go after their political opposition. What does this do? It does a couple of different things. First, it completely erodes the trust of these entities. And I pulled up some polling from Pew Research, who I love referencing. Their general public opinion polling on a variety of different matters I think are really well done and can tell a really insightful story. So here was some data from that ran from August 4th to 10th of 2025. So, data is about 6 months or so old. And the question is, what is your opinion on these two different federal agencies, the Department of Justice and the FBI's? And it's asking both Republicans, those that lean Republican, and Democrats, those that lean Democrat, and then putting those totals together. Across the Department of Justice, between 2023 and 2025, you have between a 41 and 46% unfavorable opinion of this entity, the Department of Justice. This is the nation's top and highest law enforcement arm, the DOJ, with its favorability being just 39%. 39%. You then look at the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Same situation there. You've got its unfavorability at 36%. 36% of Americans across party lines, both Republicans and Democrats, do not trust the FBI. Ladies and gentlemen, I will contend that this is a major, major problem. Now, I'm not saying that we should be walking around with blind trust. We should question our government entities, and there should always be some level of skepticism. Don't misconstrue this as we should all just be lemmings and sheep and just blindly trust whatever slop the federal government wants to feed us. That is not what I'm trying to not the point I'm trying to make at all. But these numbers are scary high. Almost 40% of the people do not trust the FBI. 46%, nearly 1 in 2 individuals have an unfavorable opinion of the Department of Justice. That is a disaster for these agencies. But as I mentioned, it's all self-inflicted. It was completely and totally preventable and avoidable. Had these entities not gotten into the political sphere. Now, yes, you make appointments to the head of the DOJ, you make appointments to the head of the FBI. These individuals are, for the most part, partisans. They are appointed by the president, who, of course, is the top partisan in the country. We elect a Republican or Democrat every 4 years to the chagrin of all of these other third parties. That's how the process works. So, yes, there's some level of some element of politics. I'm not oblivious. I'm not completely mystified by that fact. But there is a line that gets crossed when you start using your high-level position of power to go after and, in some cases, destroy your political opposition. And that is what we have seen when Democrats are in charge. We saw it in the final days, in the final 6 to 8 weeks of the Obama administration. We saw it during the entirety of the Biden administration, trying to throw charges against Donald Trump to literally make it so that he was not allowed to run for president of the United States. They wanted to get a conviction over his head so he would be disqualified and could not run for president in 2024. That was the goal. That was the plan all along. What can we do to throw Donald Trump behind bars? Because we know if he runs, he poses a very serious risk. We know if he has the ability to compete in a general election, and of course, this is as the Biden camp is completely botching everything that they're doing. I mean, not a single thing that Biden, not a single person or issue that Biden surrounded himself with did he handle in a good or appropriate manner. And so they knew that Donald Trump remained a significant threat and could very clearly, contrary to what they'd say publicly, they knew very clearly that he could win if had the opportunity, so they tried to stop him. Gin up this 2020 election case, raid his property in Mar-a-Lago, claiming that he was stealing and selling off classified or top secret information to enrich himself. This is a guy that's already got a net worth billions of dollars. Money is obviously no object for him. It's never been about the money for Trump. He continually has donated his presidential salary because, again, money's not the problem for Trump and his family. They're loaded. They've got plenty of money. They've done very well in business. I'll note, out of the public sector, right? Unlike all of these other clowns who have gotten rich off of being politicians. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Barack Obama. These people have never had anything outside of politics, yet they're worth tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. They've got houses on both coasts, flying around in private jets. Donald Trump didn't have any of that. He was not getting rich off the taxpayer in New York State when he was building and developing there. He got rich off of television shows on NBC, writing books, board games, all of the other various business ventures, some successful, some not, that he dipped into over the last 40 years. Unlike all of these other people that we talk about. Didn't get rich off the government. Didn't get rich off the U.S. taxpayer. Didn't get rich off of insider information. And because of that, they have consistently hated him. They consistently, and I think rightfully so, find him to be a major threat to their existence. And they're right, because what they're doing in many cases is illegal. This is not like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this, it's against the rules. It's no, we shouldn't be doing this. We're committing a crime. We are actively committing crimes. And if you're somebody in that position, it's no wonder that you want to make sure that you hold on to some level of power. And so the $1 million question is, where do we go from here? Great comment coming in on the show. When will there be arrests? Just being fired isn't enough. They knowingly broke the law. That, I think, is what a lot of those on the right, myself included, are waiting for. We all know what went on. We all know what these deep state actors have been up to for years. It is no longer conspiracy. It is no longer tinfoil hat. It is out in the public, folks. It has been reported by major news outlets on both the left and right. We know what was going on. And it comes back to one of the things that government unfortunately fails in most cases, and it is accountability. That is a word that the government just does not deal with well at all different levels. Whether we're talking about local governments here across North Carolina, the General Assembly in Raleigh, looking at what's going on up in Washington, D.C., there's just no accountability. And I'm not saying I want every single individual thrown behind bars, but you're at a little bit, at least for me, you're at a little bit of a breaking point. This stuff has got to stop. We are heading down a very dangerous road with the politicization of these entities like the Department of Justice and the FBI. As general public trust continues to fall for these entities, we've got a major, major problem here stateside, a major problem. And so the only way that you deal with that is accountability. The only way in which individuals begin trusting you, once again, as the Department of Justice, as the FBI, if they say you're willing to hold even your own people accountable, right? What makes some of the best CEOs and presidents of companies? Those that take accountability. They don't push it off on everybody else. They don't blame their board. They don't blame their underlings. They take it on the chin. They take the fault and the responsibility themselves. That is what makes a good leader. And that's how these very popular CEOs and presidents of companies continue to remain in the positions that they are, because they take accountability. And we just do not see that in so many different factors of our government. We just don't see it. And so I don't know how much more of this story will be told in the coming days and weeks. I mean, we know that Kash Patel is public guy. He's on television. He goes on media and talks pretty frequently. So we'll see if he's doing an exclusive with somebody, maybe the Dan Bongino show or somewhere on Fox News, Hannity or Jesse Waters or somebody else. So we'll keep an eye on that. We are still getting some reaction in from the State of the Union. I saw this funny clip pop up yesterday morning that I wanted to bring to you. There was a comment during the State of the Union about Nancy Pelosi. President Donald Trump said he's in favor of banning individuals within Congress from trading stocks. A lot of discussion about insider trading, as many of these members of Congress receive, typical 2, 3, 4, 5, 600% ROI on their investments that they're making. No question about it, using insider information. Trump called out Pelosi by name. This was her on CNN yesterday, seemingly caught off guard by the question and managing to mumble and fumble her way through some sort of sentence. I still don't even know. I've listened to this clip probably a dozen times. I still have no idea the point that she's trying to make. Take a listen to this.
There was one moment, Madam Speaker, where he called you out specifically around, of course, congressional stock trading. What do you say back to him?
I say back to him, as that's what members said, look at your own self. The inference he wants to draw is there was something wrong with that, which there wasn't. And if there was, people get prosecuted for it. For a long time now, we've been trying to pass this law. It doesn't have, now it has more support than it had before. And
Elizabeth Warren stood up and applauded. Elizabeth Warren stood and applauded tonight when the president talked about it.
Well, we all did. I did too. He said, did Nancy stand up? Yeah, I did too. A lot of people stood up. A lot of Democrats stood up. I think that will pass, depending on what the bill is. I mean, what we had, we thought we could pass. It was actually a tougher bill than Governor Spanberger had put forth. We thought it could pass, but it was clear that it wasn't going to make it to the House and the Senate. But in any event, he gives his shout out. I don't pay any attention to him. What I'm concerned about is our democracy, which he is destroying.
Ah, yes, there we go. Hey, what do you think about you getting filthy rich off of insider trading? You know what I'm concerned about? Donald Trump destroying our democracy. Gotcha. All right. It's a hell of a deflection. I included in my morning email today, which if you are not getting those, I would encourage you to do so. You can get the Nick Craig Show morning line email. It's completely free. Head on over to nickcraig.com/morning line or just visit the homepage. There's a little place there on the left-hand side where you can go ahead and put your email address in. I send it out at 6:30 every morning. It includes a local news story, a state news story, and a big national story, plus some other information, the weather and things of that we're going to see for the day. And I included in my email this morning about the State of the Union, specifically about the reaction. Right, we spent the entirety of yesterday's show going through the State of the Union, discussing the various points that were made by the president. But I wrote this in my morning email. As the reaction to the State of the Union continues to pour in, keep a close eye on what the critics have to say. Sometimes their response is even more interesting than the speech itself. And this Pelosi clip fully exemplifies that. She is pressed on an issue which there is nobody that would argue that Nancy Pelosi is not gaming the system to personally enrich herself and her family, using presumably large amounts of insider trading to do so. She's pushed on the issue and she goes, well, I ignore what President Donald Trump says because he's destroying our democracy. That's how you can tell it was probably a pretty damn good State of the Union when the response is, oh, he's destroying our democracy. Oh. It's all coming to collapse. He's a racist. He's a bigot. That's what you took out of an hour and 47-minute speech or whatever it was. He's a racist. He's destroying our democracy. I mean, you guys were saying that before the State of the Union. So nothing came out of this at all. Nothing came out whatsoever. Completely and totally laughable. All right, that's going to do it here for a Thursday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online on lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app. The show's also heard weeknights, 9 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. We'll do it again tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.